Christy Lee, hi.
Juliet, hello. We're back for a second episode on the topic of culture.
Looking forward to this. I love culture, and I think, I can see why we thought we'd recorded episodes, because we do talk about it a lot. But I think it's such an important part of any team and any organisation. So I love that we're talking about it. I also think it can be really hard to get your head around what to do about it, because it can feel intangible. And when we're busy doing day-to-day work and just running and delivering and, doing all of those things, I think the idea that we've then got to do something about the culture as well can feel a bit overwhelming. So I think it gets sort of put on the back burner quite a lot. So hopefully these conversations will help people just get a sense that it's very tangible. And there are some really specific things you can do that help the whole team stay on track and create the culture that you want.
Definitely. And if you haven't listened to the episode just prior to this one, go back and listen to that afterwards. We just talked more about creating culture and what that meant. And in today's episode, we wanted to focus on changing culture, because so often, because we're not focused on the culture, or we don't really understand how to influence and build culture, we can find ourselves in a situation where we end up with a culture that is not in line with what we want for our business. And that can happen just organically over time, possibly through having a few people influencing things they shouldn't, or when our business grows.
Yes, absolutely. And I've seen it quite often in that first situation you described, where sometimes the leader doesn't actually get involved. And so the culture evolves around the strongest people in the team. And they set the tone, really. And they create the traditions and the stories and really define how we do things around here. And I think that's where leadership is so important, because we know what we want things to look like usually. And being able to sort of articulate that. We talked in the last episode about Simon Sinek's, values plus behaviours equals culture. And as leaders, if we can be clear about those values, then we can take that next step and decide on what the culture should look like. But I see so many teams where that step hasn't happened.
Yes.
And so by the time you come into work with the team, that's what they're needing to do, is shift this culture from something that's been defined by somebody else.
Exactly. This can happen too when we have senior leadership changes in businesses. So as businesses get larger, it can often be the senior leader, particularly when we come down to team culture, but even at those senior levels at organisational culture level, when leadership changes, so does the culture. And it's why leadership is the number one reason people leave jobs, is because culture changes when leadership changes. And that's what people often then disconnect with. So navigating cultural change in the workplace is something we all have to do. Like, it's going to be part of our business growth. So this is not just something that happens in, a business that's gone wrong, or there's been some monumental leadership shift. This is something we're all going to have to navigate at some point.
And I think it's worth saying that, we talk about how people leave bosses, they don't leave jobs. And this is where culture is so fundamentally important, because people are attracted to teams and to organisations with a culture that fits with theirs. And the more values-based a person is, the more important that will be to them too, that work and that be consistent and aligned with what they think they're going into.
Yeah, definitely. So if we find ourselves in a situation where we need to make change to our culture, what are some of the strategies that you've seen or experienced implementing that have been helpful or successful?
So one of the things I think is absolutely so important is articulating what change you want. So, and communicating. I think when we're trying to change culture, we need to communicate a lot. Because we need to be talking about, this is where we are, this is where we want to be, how do we want to get there? And I think it means often going back and reassessing values, or if they haven't ever been articulated, articulating them. And as leaders, I think we need to make sure we've taken that first step, that we are really clear about where we want things to go. But that's only the first step. I think
Yeah.
unless we then share that with the team and talk with the team about what needs to change. And so often I've worked with teams where we talk about, okay, we're here, we want to be over here. What no longer serves us, if we're going to get to here and we agree this is how we want to be, what that we do now no longer serves us or isn't, it's going to hold us back for getting to that next place we want to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a good conversation because most people know. And as the leader, we might not see it. We might not know it.
Yeah. And I think that's an important part, to get the team involved in that part of the conversation, because that's the movement, that's the how, and that's the what we need to let go of, what we need to keep, what we need to add to get us there. And I think you've got to really powerfully engage the team in this vision that you're selling to them.
Yeah.
That really is these values, tying it back into what it is that the organisation's all about, or why that's so important. Because if someone can sort of emotionally engage in that vision, they're going to be much more likely to participate in cultural change to help that be achieved than if they think that, if they're not clear on that vision possibly, or they're just not that invested in it. And there's a really great example that comes to mind some years back here where I live. Our local council went through, and it's going through a lot of change at the moment, went through some change, and they got a new CEO, was very much a changing of the guards, and he very clearly went on a campaign to say, this is the vision I'm setting for this business for the next whatever period of time. And he was very open about it. He spoke about it very publicly as well as openly with the team, and said, I want all of you on board. Very clearly said, I want all of you on board, and this is where we're going. And had a huge engagement strategy around that to help move that business. Now, ultimately, sometimes what has to happen is that we want everyone on board, but if someone does not want to get on board with us, despite all of our efforts, it's okay to make people change at that time too. But because if someone's going to really resist the culture that we're trying to create, maybe they're not right for the business.
I think that's true. And I think almost inevitably, when you're changing the culture significantly, there will be people who say that's not for me.
Yep.
It's comfortable.
And that's okay.
Culture. Yes. And I think that is absolutely fine. I think that can often be a positive.
Yes.
Because they will be the people who don't want to share. So if you're trying to force that, it doesn't work anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's also possible when we're trying to change in that way that people, when they're resisting, will try and hold other people with them.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to identify a few people who are really on board changes and get them to help as champions as well. So talking things up and being really not Pollyanna-ish, but positive about what we're gaining, not focusing on what we're losing. Because I think people can sometimes dig themselves into the, God, it's all gloom and doom because everything's going to be different and I'm not sure and I'm uncomfortable and I'm going to lose all of these things. When we talk about losing traditions and changing stories, and I've worked with teams where it can be as simple as, well, I'm no longer going to be sitting next to so-and-so in this thing, or we're not going to have our morning teas the way we did because suddenly we're going to be much bigger, or just really simple things, but people hang on to them as something they're losing. I think it can be so important to focus on what we're gaining and getting people in the team to focus on that. What will be better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other important thing to remember is if someone is a little change resistant, that doesn't mean you can't get them on board. People sometimes are very fearful of change, and because they don't understand it, they know you're telling them they're going to gain all these things, but they can't maybe yet see it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the strategy there can be, if it feels like a huge change to them, start small and maybe with one piece of the puzzle, one part, one value rather than all the values, and get them to try it on. How about for the next month we try focusing on this and see what difference that makes, because you'll know that it's going to make a great difference, but they need to experience it sometimes. And once you can get them to make that first shift, whatever that might look like, they're much more likely to come on board for the rest of the journey. If you can get them to take just little baby steps, I think.
I think that's so true. And you talked in the last episode about teams, maybe talking about a value each month and sort of unpacking what that means for how they're working and communicating. I think when the culture is changing, that's almost more important.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly if you're growing rapidly and you're bringing new people in, for them to be in those conversations where they're hearing what is changing, what is the new culture looking like, and how are we going with it, I think is really powerful. And I think as a leader, it helps you keep your finger on the pulse of how the team is feeling about this as well.
And I think in that growth phase, in terms of that solidifying the culture, the onboarding process has to be on point, and it really is so important, because if you don't get it bedded in then, you lose opportunity, and it can either just detract them away from the culture, or it can just take longer for them to really settle into that.
Yeah, I think, yes, and I see often it can take longer, or they're just surprised. And so that's a bit disconcerting when you come in, and they talk about the psychological contract when you join a team or an organization. And if there are these surprises, people can be really sort of disconcerted, and then they're not sure. Then they start to sort of second guess and doubt what they're doing. And I think that makes it much more difficult for them to settle in and become part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And if, in terms of engaging our team in the change, obviously we've just spoken about casting the vision, engaging them in the vision. And I think also really getting them involved in the practicalities. We spoke in the last episode about above the line and below the line behaviours in terms of, I guess, describing our culture and how we do things around here. I think that is a great exercise to do when we're changing culture as well.
I totally agree. Yes, absolutely. And I do think just to keep talking about it is important, and I agree with you. I think it can sometimes become a bit overwhelming for people. And if you see that some of the more influential people in the team are becoming negative and seem to be overwhelmed, these sorts of conversations are the really important ones.
Yes.
Where we sort of unpack things and talk about what's going on and where is the fear. And I think keeping it really practical too, in that when we're changing, almost inevitably, you're not going to be just changing your culture. It's because a whole lot of other stuff is changing. So it will sit alongside process change, potentially structural change, and there's a whole lot of things that go with that.
Yeah.
That will be part of this. And I think being able to sort of bring those in so that the whole thing is happening together, so that culture is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening alongside those process changes or those structural changes or whatever is happening that are very tangible. So you start to link the behaviours or the traditions and the stories to those tangible things that people can really see and experience.
Yeah, I think that point about traditions you just touched on, that can be really powerful, creating those traditions in helping make that cultural change, because things like traditions, they really just build on that feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself and being part of a tribe, and that connection is what people are looking for in work. So whatever that might look like, and I know we've spoken about this, I'm sure, in a previous episode about the change in traditions when we went from in-person to virtual work, and we went from virtual to hybrid work, and we were changing traditions like going out for lunches or those kind of things. It's a similar concept.
It totally is, absolutely. And I think so often we don't even acknowledge traditions. There's something that just sit there and roll along, and people buy into them as they join a team, and on it goes. Yes. And I think being able to sort of be really explicit about what is this, and does it still serve us, or do we need to do this slightly differently? And I think you're absolutely right. The whole having to work virtually made a whole lot of things. People felt that they had lost a whole lot of ways that they connected, and those small conversations, that personal connection, and really struggled with that. And I think those are the traditions that until we're actually forced to think about them, they just sort of sit in the background.
Exactly. We don't think about them as traditions at all, but that's to our people, that's what they are.
Yes. Well, it's a bit like if you change your Christmas celebration or whatever it is, the way your family gathers. No one sort of thinks about it or articulates it, But if you change it and you mess with it,
yeah,
you know,
right.
no.
They're mortified.
Yes, we always do like that, you know.
What, we're changing location? No.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. I think, and as a team or an organisation grows or evolves, I think that's a big part of what does change.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think other thing to remember is it doesn't all have to change at once. You can make some progress on your change and still get the result. And sometimes that might be a better approach than trying to just do the line in the sand conversation, because that's definitely an approach you can take and say, this from this point on, this is the line in the sand, this is how we're moving forward, and do all the things we've said. Or don't have that conversation and you slowly work through the bits of culture that you're not loving and reform them and replace them. And either way is totally fine.
I think it is. And I think it so depends on what your current culture is and where you're trying to get to as well.
Yes.
You know, and how you as a leader work, and, you know, what conversations you've had with the team around behaviours and culture. Because all of that will feed into how you deal with the changes. But I think understanding that some people won't want to change. That's just the way life is, and not to worry too much about that. Just accept that can be really positive. In fact, it's easy to bring in people with different skills and experience.
Yeah, there is a big difference between someone who is fearful of change and change resistant and someone who is against change. And the fearful people, we want to help them move forward with.
Yeah.
Those that are completely against the change, that's okay. It's time to move on. And because they'll only pull the cultural change back and will stop you from bringing in people who would love this new culture.
Yes. And they will probably feel much better as soon as they go as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
A lot of fear for them that's holding them stuck and not wanting to move with the new culture as well.
That's right. Exactly. So I think it's fair to say cultural change isn't necessarily always simple and can take time, but making change can be so powerful for the business and has, obviously flow-on effects to productivity and profitability. But just in terms of the vibe and the place to work, it is a really valuable change to make.
And I think this also is where, we talked in the last episode about leadership. This is where leadership is so important. And it can be really important as a leader to acknowledge any behaviours that you've had that may not belong in the new way of doing things. Get a little bit vulnerable about that and to talk about how you're going to change things that you're doing.
And get input from your team around that.
Yeah.
If I'm showing up as your leader with these new values or this new culture, what do you want to see from me? What do you want me to stop doing, start doing, keep doing?
Yeah.
You might get some really interesting insight that you didn't expect just by asking people.
They're great conversations to have. And they don't have to be too scary for anybody.
No.
Because it's all about just how do we get to here? This is what we're trying to change.
Yep.
How do we get to this point we want to be at?
If the team can see you making change, that's going to really support them in feeling comfortable to make change themselves as well. So it's not just, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and you guys need to all change.
Yes.
It's we're evolving here together.
Yeah. And look, as leaders, that can often be confronting too.
Yeah.
Because particularly if things are growing or you're having to adapt to an environment in the market or whatever that's really challenging you. That as a leader can be really difficult because you're dealing with all sorts of other things as well. Just acknowledging that with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's been a great conversation. Hopefully it's sparked some ideas if someone's listening and is just unhappy with their workplace culture but unsure how to change. Hopefully this has given you some ideas. And if you are thinking about your workplace culture, wanting to change your workplace culture, come over and let us know on the Facebook page, which is Grow Your Influence on Facebook. Share with us what's happening, your ideas, and start a discussion around workplace culture.
We'd love to hear from you. Perfect. And I'll put a photo of the puppy in there now that it's been on the podcast.
as heard on the Grow Your Influence podcast.
Exactly. Thanks, Christy. Great to talk.
Thanks, Juliette.